My son left me at the hospital after my surgery, so I froze his bank account the next morning. The anesthesia wore off like a slow, cruel sunrise, bringing with it not the warmth of a new day but the sharp, biting cold of reality. The first thing I felt was the throb in my left hip, a deep, rhythmic ache from the replacement surgery that seemed to pulse in time with the fluorescent lights above. The second thing I noticed was the antiseptic smell that clung to everything in this sterile white tomb. The third thing I saw was the empty chair beside my hospital bed. My name is Anna Bellweather, and that empty chair was the beginning of my story, or rather, the end of the one I had been telling myself for 42 years. The chair was a standard-issue hospital visitor's chair, covered in that peculiar blue vinyl that hospitals seem to love, probably because it hides stains well. Someone had pulled it close to my bed at an angle that suggested they had been sitting there, leaning forward, perhaps holding my hand. But now it sat vacant, a cruel monument to broken promises. My son, Daniel, had promised he would be there when I woke up. "I'll be right here, Mom," he'd said, squeezing my hand before they wheeled me into the operating room. His grip had been firm, his eyes meeting mine with what I had desperately wanted to believe was genuine concern. "Don't you worry about a thing, I'll be the first face you see when you wake up." I had worried anyway, not about the surgery. Dr. Martinez had performed thousands of hip replacements, and I had faith in his steady hands. I worried about Daniel. I had seen the look in his eyes during our pre-surgery conversation, that familiar flicker of impatience, like a man checking his watch during a funeral. There was the barely concealed sigh when I'd asked him to bring my reading glasses from home, the way his fingers had drummed against his thigh when the nurse explained the post-operative care instructions. His wife, Stephanie, hadn't even bothered to come to the hospital. She had texted me the night before, "Sorry, Anna, I have a critical yoga retreat in Sedona. It's been booked for months, you understand." A yoga retreat, while her mother-in-law faced major surgery alone. A nurse bustled in, her pristine white shoes squeaking against the linoleum floor. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her face wore that expression of professional kindness that nurses perfect, warm enough to comfort, but detached enough to survive the daily parade of human suffering. "Good morning, dear. How are we feeling today?" she asked, checking the various monitors and machines that surrounded my bed like electronic sentries. "The surgery went perfectly. Dr. Martinez said you have excellent bone density for your age. You should heal beautifully." She paused, glancing at the empty chair with a slight frown. "Your son left a note for you." She handed me a folded piece of paper from the bedside table. My heart lifted for just a moment. Perhaps it was a loving message, an explanation, maybe even a promise of when he'd return. But as my fingers unfolded the paper, my heart sank like a stone thrown into a dark well. It wasn't a get-well card, it wasn't even proper stationery. It was a note scrawled in his hurried handwriting on the back of a hospital parking receipt. The paper was slightly crumpled, as if he'd written it quickly while standing. Mom, something came up at work. A big deal closing that couldn't wait. Had to go. Stephanie's flight gets in late tonight, so we won't be able to pick you up tomorrow. The discharge nurse will call you a cab. Don't worry about the cost, we'll reimburse you later. We'll check in next week, **D**. No, I love you. No, hope you feel better soon. No, sorry I couldn't stay. Just a transactional message, an item checked off a to-do list written by someone eager to move on to more important matters. We'll check in next week. I had just undergone major surgery. A procedure that would leave me dependent on a walker for 6 weeks, unable to drive, barely able to cook for myself, and my only child wouldn't be checking in for a week. The nurse saw the look on my face, the way my features crumpled like paper in rain. Her professional composure softened into something more human, more motherly. "Do you have anyone else we can call, dear?" she asked gently, her hand resting lightly on my arm. "A sister, a close friend, someone who could help you get settled at home?" I shook my head, the shame burning in my throat like swallowed fire. I was 68 years old, a widow of 8 years, and utterly, completely alone in a world I had given everything to build for someone else. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I had no one. In my single-minded devotion to my son's success, I had let every other relationship wither and die. "I'll be fine," I whispered, but the words tasted like lies. My ledger, my book of accounting, wasn't written down anywhere. It was sewn into the very fabric of my life with threads of sacrifice and love. It was in the scars on my hands from 40 years of working as a seamstress, spending countless hours hunched over my Singer sewing machine, altering priceless gowns for the wealthy women of Chicago's Gold Coast. My fingers bore the tiny puncture wounds of 1,000 pins, the calluses from manipulating heavy fabrics, the permanent indent on my right index finger from years of pushing needles through stubborn material. Every stitch I sewed was for Daniel. Every late night spent squinting under the lamp, every ache in my back from bending over intricate beadwork, every client I smiled at while they complained about insignificant flaws, it was all so my son could have the best of everything. It was in the second mortgage I took out on my small condo to pay for his MBA from Kellogg. I remember sitting in the bank manager's office, my hands shaking as I signed the papers that would double my monthly payments well into my retirement years. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Bellweather?" the banker had asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "This is a significant financial commitment for someone in your situation." "It's for my son's education," I had replied, my voice steady despite my trembling hands. "He's going to change the world." It was in the retirement fund I had cashed out, my entire nest egg, built penny by penny over decades of careful saving, to give him the $100,000 in seed money for his tech startup. The financial advisor had looked at me like I was insane when I requested the full withdrawal. "Mrs. Bellweather, this money was meant to last you through retirement. If you give this away, you'll have nothing left but Social Security." "My son will take care of me," I had said with absolute conviction. "This company is going to make him rich. We're family, we take care of each other." That company, Innovate Solutions, was now valued at over $50 million. Daniel lived in a penthouse that cost more per month than I had ever made in a year, and here I was, alone in a hospital bed, reading a note on a parking receipt. My late husband, Robert, had been a history teacher at Lincoln High School, a man rich in knowledge and wisdom but poor in finances. He died of a sudden aneurysm on a Tuesday morning in March, collapsing in his classroom while explaining the causes of World War I to a group of bored sophomores. He was 59 years old. One moment he was passionate and alive, gesturing at the blackboard, and the next he was gone, leaving me with a mountain of love and memories and a molehill of savings. I made a promise to Robert's memory that day at his funeral, standing beside his casket in the cemetery where the March wind cut through my borrowed black dress. Daniel was just starting his senior year at Northwestern, bright and ambitious but struggling with the financial pressure of tuition and living expenses. "I promise you, Robert," I whispered to the cold ground where they lowered his simple wooden casket, "our son will want for nothing. I will be his foundation, his safety net, his bridge to the life we could only dream of giving him." And I kept that promise. Oh, how I kept it. I worked 70-hour weeks, taking on every alteration job I could find. My dining room table became my workspace, covered with pins and fabric scraps and measuring tape. I ate canned soup for dinner, the same brand, the same flavor, Campbell's chicken noodle, because it was 59 cents a can, so he could afford to eat at the nice restaurants where he networked with professors and future business partners. I wore the same winter coat for 10 years, a navy blue wool blend that I had bought at a second-hand shop. The lining was torn, the cuffs were frayed, and one of the pockets had a hole that I never bothered to mend because no one would see it. But Daniel wore custom-tailored suits to his investor meetings, shirts that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, shoes that were handmade in Italy. I became smaller so he could become bigger. I shrunk my world down to the size of my sewing room so his could expand to fill boardrooms and conference halls and penthouse offices. And he did expand. His company, Innovate Solutions, took off like a rocket. It started in his cramped studio apartment with just him and his laptop, building software solutions for small businesses. Within 2 years, he had a small office and 3 employees. Within 5 years, he had 2 floors of a downtown high-rise and a staff of 50. Within 10 years, he was being featured on the cover of Chicago Business magazine as one of the city's entrepreneurs to watch. He became a tech mogul, a minor celebrity in the Chicago business world. He bought a sprawling glass and steel penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan with floor-to-ceiling windows and marble countertops and a wine cellar that cost more than most people's houses. He married Stephanie, a woman whose professional ambition was matched only by her disdain for anything that didn't come with a designer label or a prestigious pedigree. They lived a life of polished perfection, attending charity galas and wine tastings and exclusive dinner parties. Their Instagram feed was a carefully curated collection of exotic vacations and 5-star restaurants and designer outfits. It was a life I had stitched together for them with my own blood, sweat, and sacrifice, thread by thread, dollar by dollar. And in return, I was given an empty chair and a note on a parking receipt. That night in the hospital, I didn't sleep. The pain medication made me drowsy, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw that empty chair. The pain in my hip was nothing compared to the pain in my heart, a deep, aching hollow that seemed to expand with each breath. But beneath the pain, something else was stirring, something cold and quiet and dangerous. The anger of a woman who had finally realized she had been weaving a beautiful tapestry for 42 years for a son who was colorblind to its beauty. I thought about the money, not just the big sums, the mortgage, the retirement fund, the business loan, but the small, constant hemorrhages that had bled me dry over the years. The $5,000 a month allowance I gave them, which Stephanie had convinced Daniel to request because she felt it was unseemly for a man of Daniel's stature to have a mother living on a fixed income. "It's not charity, Anna," Stephanie had explained to me over lunch at an expensive restaurant I couldn't afford, her manicured fingers wrapped around a glass of wine that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "Think of it as your contribution to the family brand. When people see Daniel driving a nice car and living in a beautiful home, it reflects well on all of us, including you." They saw it as my contribution to their success. I saw it as the price of admission to my own son's life. $5,000 a month just to remain relevant, to maintain my status as family rather than being discarded like an old appliance that had outlived its usefulness. But there was one thing they didn't know about. One thread in the tapestry they had never seen, never suspected existed. Before Robert died, his estranged uncle Marcus, a reclusive man who had made a fortune in early tech investments back when companies like Apple and Microsoft were just garage startups, passed away and left Robert his entire estate. Marcus had been the black sheep of the family, a brilliant but antisocial man who had never married, never had children, and barely spoke to his relatives. When he died alone in his cluttered San Francisco apartment, he left everything to Robert in a will that surprised everyone. It wasn't a huge amount by today's standards, but to us, struggling on a teacher's salary with a son in college, it was a king's ransom, $300,000. Robert, ever the prudent historian who understood the cyclical nature of fortune and misfortune, didn't touch it. He didn't even tell Daniel about it. "This is for your old age, Anna," he'd said, sitting me down at our kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the inheritance paperwork spread between us. "This is your safety net, not Daniel's, yours. Promise me you'll put it somewhere safe, somewhere no one can find it, somewhere even you might forget about it until you really need it." "But Robert," I had protested, "Daniel could use this money now, for his education, for his future." "No," he had said firmly, his teacher voice brooking no argument. "Daniel is young and strong and brilliant. He'll make his own way in the world, but you're going to be alone someday, Anna. I hate to think about it, but it's true. When that day comes, I want to know you have something to fall back on, something that's just yours." I had promised, and I kept that promise too. I opened a brokerage account with a small, discreet firm downtown under my maiden name, Anna Morty. I met with a quiet, brilliant financial advisor named James Chen, a soft-spoken man in his 30s who treated my modest inheritance with the same care and attention he gave to his millionaire clients. The key, he had explained, is patience and diversification. We'll invest this conservatively but wisely. Some blue-chip stocks, some bonds, some index funds, nothing flashy, nothing risky, just steady, compound growth over time. And grow it did, over 25 years through market booms and busts, through recessions and recoveries. That nest egg had grown like a living thing. James was a magician with numbers, adjusting the portfolio with surgical precision, reinvesting dividends, taking advantage of market dips to buy low and sell high. 300,000 became 400,000, 400 became 600, 600 became 1 million, then 2 million, then 5 million. By the time I was lying in that hospital bed reading my son's dismissive note, Anna Morty's portfolio was worth $7.3 million. Daniel and Stephanie knew nothing about it. They saw me as Anna Bellweather, the poor seamstress, the dependent mother who relied on their monthly allowance and their occasional visits like a pet relies on scraps from the table. They had no idea they were dealing with Anna Morty, a silent, solvent force who had been watching and waiting and growing stronger while they grew more arrogant and careless. The next morning, the discharge nurse came in with a clipboard and a brochure for a medical transport service. She was a different nurse from the night before, younger and more businesslike, but equally kind. "The doctor says you're healing beautifully, Mrs. Bellweather," she said, checking my chart. "You should be able to go home this afternoon. Do you have transportation arranged?" I thought about the note, about calling a cab that would cost $75 for the ride home, $75 that Daniel had promised to reimburse later, as if I were an employee submitting an expense report. "That won't be necessary," I said, my voice steady and clear. "But could you do me a favor? Could you please bring me the phone book, the yellow pages?" She looked at me with curiosity, probably wondering why anyone would want a phone book in the age of smartphones, but she complied. I flipped through the pages, my fingers tracing the columns of businesses with the focused intensity of a general planning a battle. I wasn't looking for a taxi. I was looking for a weapon. My first call was to a name that leaped out at me: Lincoln Livery Service, luxury and discretion since 1987. "Lincoln Livery, this is Marcus speaking. How can I help you today?" "Good morning," I said, my voice calm and professional. "I need a car and a driver for the day, a Lincoln Town car if you have one available, and I need a driver who can handle several errands with me around the city. I'll be paying in cash." There was a brief pause. "Certainly, ma'am. When would you like the car?" "In 1 hour," I said. "I'll be at Northwestern Memorial Hospital main entrance." "And what's the nature of your errands, if you don't mind me asking, just so I can prepare the appropriate vehicle and driver?" I smiled, feeling something shift inside me like tumblers falling into place in a lock. "Business meetings," I said, "very important business meetings." My second call was to James Chen, my financial advisor. "Anna," his voice carried immediate concern, "is everything all right? You never call during business hours." "James," I said, my voice clear and steady as mountain air, "it's Anna Morty. I need you to do 2 things for me this morning, and I need them done quickly and quietly." "Of course, what can I do for you?" "First, I need you to wire $50,000 in cash to the downtown branch of First National Bank. I'll be there to pick it up in person in about 2 hours. $50,000 in cash? His voice was carefully neutral, but I could hear the questions behind it. "Anna, that's highly unusual. May I ask what this is for?" "The second thing," I continued, ignoring his question, "is more important. I need you to freeze the Bellweather Family Trust account immediately, the one that handles the monthly transfers to my son." There was a long silence. When James spoke again, his voice was soft with understanding. "Anna, what's happened? This is completely out of character for you." I looked around the sterile hospital room, at the empty chair, at the crumpled parking receipt on my bedside table. Everything, I said quietly, is finally becoming very, very clear. Consider it done, he said. Anna, if you need anything else, anything at all, you call me immediately. Do you understand? I understand perfectly, I said. Thank you, James, for everything. An hour later, a man named Marcus, a different Marcus from the one on the phone, arrived at the hospital entrance driving a gleaming black Lincoln Town car. He was a gentleman in his 60s, dressed in a black suit with a crisp white shirt and a silver tie. When he saw me emerging from the hospital with my walker, he immediately got out of the car and approached with the practiced grace of someone who had spent decades in service to others. Mrs. Bellweather, he said, offering his arm, I'm Marcus Williams, I'll be your driver today. He handled my walker with gentle professionalism, folding it smoothly and placing it in the trunk while holding the door open for me. The interior of the Lincoln was immaculate, leather seats that smelled of quality and care, classical music playing softly from hidden speakers, a small bottle of water waiting for me in the cup holder. It was such a stark contrast to my son's hurried departure, to his casual assumption that I would take a cab home like a stranger, that I felt tears prick at my eyes. Where to first, ma'am? Marcus asked, settling into the driver's seat. First National Bank downtown branch, I said. After that I have several other stops. I hope you don't have other appointments today. My time is entirely yours, Mrs. Bellweather, he said, pulling smoothly into traffic. Take all the time you need. Our first stop was the bank. The downtown branch of First National was an imposing building of gray stone and brass fixtures, the kind of old-fashioned bank that projected stability and permanence. I walked in, leaning on my walker, and was immediately approached by a young woman in a navy suit. Mrs. Morty, she said, I'm Jennifer Walsh, the branch manager. Mr. Chen called ahead. I have your withdrawal ready. She led me to a private office where a heavy envelope waited on the desk. $50,000 in cash, mostly hundreds, bundled with bank straps. It was more money than I had ever held at one time, but somehow it felt less significant than the small bills I used to count and recount when Daniel was in college. Is there anything else we can help you with today? Jennifer asked. Actually, yes, I said. I'd like to open a new checking account under the name Anna Morty. I'll be making some significant purchases in the coming days. 10 minutes later, I walked out of that bank with a new checkbook, a new debit card, and the kind of confidence that only comes from knowing you hold all the cards in a game where the other players don't even know you're playing. Our second stop was a high-end condominium building on the Gold Coast, one of those gleaming towers that rise from the shore of Lake Michigan like glass and steel monuments to wealth and ambition. I had an appointment to see a 3-bedroom penthouse unit, the one directly across the hall from Daniel and Stephanie's apartment. The realtor, a woman in her 40s wearing a sharp red suit and shoes that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check, met us in the lobby. Her name was Patricia Blackwood, and she looked at my simple clothes and my walker with barely concealed skepticism. Mrs., she glanced at her notes, Bellweather, I'm Patricia Blackwood from Premier Properties. I have to ask, are you pre-qualified for this price range? This unit is listed at $2.8 million. I smiled, the expression feeling foreign on my face after so many months of worry and sadness. I'm a cash buyer, Miss Blackwood. Will that be a problem? Her entire demeanor changed instantly, like a flower turning toward the sun. Of course not. Cash offers are always welcome. Let me show you this beautiful property. The penthouse was magnificent, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, hardwood floors that gleamed like mirrors, a kitchen with marble countertops and appliances that looked like they belonged in a spaceship. But what I loved most was the view from the living room window. I could see directly into Daniel and Stephanie's apartment across the hall. Their oversized windows, which they had installed to show off their sophisticated lifestyle, were about to become their vulnerability. The view is incredible, Patricia gushed, standing beside me at the window. You can see the whole city from here, and the building has amazing amenities, a concierge, a fitness center, a rooftop garden. I'll take it, I said simply. She blinked. I'm sorry. I said I'll take it. When can we close? Well, there are inspections to arrange, financing to finalize. Cash offer, I reminded her. No financing needed. I can have the money transferred today if necessary. Patricia's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. In that case, we could close within a week. Would you like to make an offer below asking price in this market? Full asking price, I said, 2.8 million, but I want to close in 3 days. 3 days? She looked like she might faint. Mrs. Bellweather, that's incredibly fast for a real estate transaction. 3 days, I repeated. Is that a problem? She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. Let me make some calls. Our third stop was a law firm, not one of the big, prestigious firms that Daniel used for his corporate work, but a smaller, hungrier practice that specialized in financial disputes and contract law. The building was older, less impressive, but the lawyers inside had something that the downtown silk suit crowd often lacked: the drive of people who had to earn every victory. I met with a young lawyer named Maria Flores, a woman in her early 30s with intelligent dark eyes and the kind of focused energy that comes from fighting for clients who actually need her help. Her office was small but organized, law books stacked neatly on shelves, diplomas and bar certifications arranged precisely on the walls. Mrs. Bellweather, she said, gesturing for me to sit in one of the 2 chairs facing her desk, how can I help you today? I didn't tell her the whole story. I didn't mention the empty chair or the parking receipt or the years of feeling invisible in my own son's life. I kept it businesslike, professional. I've been funding my son's company for years, I said. Significant amounts of money, some of it was documented as loans, some of it was not. I'm beginning to have concerns about whether these transactions were handled properly. Maria leaned forward, her pen poised over a legal pad. What kind of amounts are we talking about? The initial seed money was $100,000. That was documented with a promissory note. But over the years, there have been additional transfers, personal loans, monthly allowances, emergency funds, probably another $200,000 all told. Her eyebrows rose. And your son's company is successful? Very successful, valued at approximately $50 million. She set down her pen and looked at me directly. Mrs. Bellweather, may I ask why you're bringing this to me now? Has something changed in your relationship with your son? I thought about the empty chair, about waking up alone after surgery while he was closing deals. Let's just say I've gained some clarity about the nature of our business relationship. Maria smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the smile of a shark who had just caught the scent of blood in the water. Mrs. Bellweather, I think we should examine all the documentation very carefully. Sometimes family members take advantage of generosity in ways that may not be entirely legal, especially when significant sums of money are involved. What would you need from me? Everything, she said. Bank records, canceled checks, any correspondence about the loans, the original promissory note. I'll want to conduct a forensic accounting of all transfers between you and your son's company if there's any evidence of financial impropriety. She let the sentence hang in the air like a sword over a thread. How long would this take? I asked. With the right resources, a few weeks, maybe less if your son cooperates with document requests. And if he doesn't cooperate? Her smile grew sharper. Then we have other options: subpoenas, court orders. Forensic accountants can be very persuasive when they need to be. By the time Marcus dropped me at my small condo that afternoon, the pieces were in motion. The bank account was frozen. The lawyers were preparing their documents. The realtor was pulling strings to arrange the fastest closing in her career. I sat in my tiny living room, surrounded by the simple furniture and modest decorations that had been my world for so many years. Everything looked different now, like I was seeing it through new eyes. This wasn't poverty, this was choice. I had chosen to live small so Daniel could live large. But that choice was ending today. The first call from Daniel came at exactly 5:02 in the evening. I was sitting in my kitchen eating a simple dinner of soup and toast when my phone rang. His name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I felt the old familiar flutter of anticipation. Maybe he was calling to apologize. Maybe he had realized his mistake. Maybe. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" His voice was sharp with panic and anger. "I tried to pay for dinner tonight and my card was declined. The bank said the account is frozen. Did you do this? This is a catastrophe. You've humiliated me in front of potential investors." The investors, of course. That's what this was about. Not concern for my well-being, not guilt over abandoning me in the hospital, just embarrassment over a declined credit card. "Did I?" I asked, my voice as calm and level as a frozen lake. "I'm a little hazy, Daniel. I just had major surgery, you know. It's hard to remember things clearly when you're on pain medication." "This isn't a joke," he screamed, and I could hear the panic cracking his voice like ice under pressure. "I need that money. You have to unfreeze it right now. I have obligations. I have a reputation to maintain." "I'm afraid I can't do that," I said, taking a sip of my soup. "You see, my doctor told me I need to avoid all forms of stress for the next several weeks. And honestly, Daniel, managing your finances has become very, very stressful for me. I'm putting myself on strict bed rest. My financial advisor will be in touch with you." "Your financial advisor?" His voice climbed higher. "What financial advisor, Mom? What are you talking about?" "Have a good evening, Daniel," I said. "I hope your dinner wasn't too expensive." I hung up the phone. The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I had heard in years. The next morning, a team of forensic accountants hired by Maria Flores served Daniel with a subpoena at his office. According to Maria, who called me with an update, they had walked into the gleaming headquarters of Innovate Solutions at precisely 9 in the morning, dressed in dark suits and carrying briefcases full of legal documents. They requested every financial document from his company for the last 10 years, Maria reported, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Bank records, tax returns, loan applications, investor reports, board meeting minutes, everything. How did he react? According to my accountant, he went very pale and asked if he needed a lawyer. They told him that was his choice, but that cooperation would make things much smoother for everyone involved. They were looking for the $100,000 in seed money I had given him a decade ago, money he had always told me was a gift, but for which I had, on the advice of my late husband, made him sign a promissory note. Robert had insisted on it, even though it had felt awkward and businesslike at the time. "Always document money transactions, even with family," Robert had said. "Especially with family, love fades but contracts endure." That note had been sitting in my safe deposit box for 10 years, forgotten by Daniel but preserved by me like a time bomb waiting for the right moment to explode. The note was clear and legal and binding. It stipulated that the money was a loan, not a gift, and that it was convertible to a 20% equity stake in his company at my discretion. 20% of a $50 million company. $10 million. The phone calls became more frequent and more frantic. Daniel called 6 times that day, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. "Mom, please call me back. I don't understand what's happening. Can we talk about this?" "Mom, I'm sorry I left the hospital. Okay, I should have stayed. I was wrong, but this legal stuff is crazy. You're scaring me." "Mom, my lawyer says this could destroy my company. Is that what you want, to destroy everything I've worked for?" Stephanie, back from her yoga retreat with a deep tan and fresh highlights in her hair, left a message that was a masterpiece of narcissistic injury and wounded entitlement. "Anna, I don't know what kind of passive-aggressive game you're playing, but you are ruining our reputation. People are talking about this legal drama all over the city. Daniel's investors are spooked. This is an attack on our family and I won't stand for it. You need to call off these lawyers immediately and apologize for this embarrassment." Our family, I thought, listening to her message for the 3rd time. The same family that leaves its matriarch alone in a hospital room. A week later, I moved into my new penthouse. The closing had gone smoothly. Cash transactions have a way of eliminating complications. Patricia Blackwood had handled every detail with the enthusiasm of someone who had just earned the largest commission of her career. Moving day was surreal. A team of professional movers packed up my modest belongings from the small condo where I had lived for 15 years and transported them to a penthouse worth more than most people see in a lifetime. My simple furniture looked lost in the vast spaces, like children's toys scattered in a cathedral. But I wasn't concerned about the furniture, I was focused on the view. From my new living room window, I had a perfect, unobstructed view into Daniel and Stephanie's sprawling apartment across the hall. Their floor-to-ceiling windows, installed to showcase their sophisticated lifestyle to the world below, now served as a theater screen for my private entertainment. I watched them pacing back and forth in their living room, their movements agitated and desperate. I saw Stephanie throw a crystal vase against the wall, a $500 piece of art from their wedding registry, reduced to glittering fragments on their polished marble floor. I saw Daniel sitting at his kitchen island with his head in his hands for hours, surrounded by legal documents and financial statements. But I wasn't just watching, I was building. My new home became the headquarters for what I started to call the Bellweather Project. Using my fortune, the money they never knew I had, the inheritance they never suspected existed, I created a foundation with a simple but powerful mission: to provide grants and support for the helpers. The overlooked people who make the world run smoothly while receiving little recognition or reward. I hired a small staff of dedicated professionals. A program director named Sarah Chen, James's daughter as it happened, a grants administrator named Michael Torres, and a part-time accountant named Betty Williams. We worked out of a small office space in my new building, transforming what had been a guest bedroom into a nerve center for organized compassion. We funded scholarships for nursing students, understanding that the world would always need people who could sit by hospital beds and offer comfort to the frightened and alone. We provided grants to underpaid teachers to buy classroom supplies, remembering my husband Robert and his endless frustration with school budgets that never stretched far enough. We funded community gardens in food deserts. We provided stipends for social workers who burned out trying to save the world on minimum wage. Each grant was a stitch in the fabric of a better world, a quiet act of repair, and from my window I watched Daniel's world unravel. His company's stock dipped as rumors of the legal battle spread. His perfect life viewed through my window was a silent movie of desperation. Finally, he came to my door, not to the penthouse. He couldn't get past the doorman. He came to the foundation office. He looked thin, broken. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm ruined, please. Tell me what I have to do." I looked at him, "My son, a stranger forged by my own love and sacrifice. You want to know what to do?" I asked calmly. I handed him a brochure for a local nursing school. "Go become one of the helpers. Go learn what it means to sit by an empty bed and offer comfort. That is the only business I am willing to invest in now." He stared at the brochure as if it were written in a foreign language. He didn't take it. He just turned and walked away. I didn't watch him go. I had work to do. My revenge wasn't his destruction. It was my own beautiful, quiet, and meaningful reconstruction. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories, because here we know that the hands that can mend a seam can also mend the world, one stitch at a time. If this story touched you as much as it did us, then don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment.